Okay, then good evening, everybody. Bonsoir. It's 7 o'clock here in Japan where I'm doing the streaming over here. Of course, on your side, I guess it's going to be 11 a.m. if it's French people watching, or I think it's 12 o'clock in Finland, from where we should also be getting some participants here. Good evening, good day. Good to have you here. Yep. Okay, so for today's lecture then, I had the honor of being invited from the by the French Go Federation to do a kind of a final workshop for the I think it was a series of this fall's different kinds of lectures by different teachers, and it seems like I got the honor of doing the final lecture for the year. And also it's in cooperation with the 2024 European Go Congress, which will be held in Toulouse, as you can see here. So it's that kind of a combination lecture here. So I was just, I got invited to hold a lecture, and I wanted to think up something that's still useful for everybody who is watching, but that also somehow can be connected to the theme of the European Go Congress. And then I figured that we can always talk about different time settings and how to make the best use of your time. So that's how I planned the content for this day. About congresses in general, I would expect that most people watching here at least know what the European Go Congress is, right? Most likely. Like, even if you're not European, you have probably heard of it. I'm pretty sure it's one of the biggest Go events in the world. So, of course, we had the Corona pandemic, so for the in 2020 to 2021, we didn't have the European Go Congress. This year we had it after a 2-year break, so it was in Romania this year. I was also there. Next year has been decided recently. It's going to be in Leipzig, in Germany. This, well, I will also do a little bit of advertising for them. I think the organizers here will not mind. So I'm just writing here in the chat, so you can also check 2023 Congress website from here. And then, of course, we have the 2024 Congress. You have the link here in the upper right corner of this stream. And you can also see the Congress details. And I think registering is also possible, and looking for accommodation and so on. So, okay, thank you. Thank you, Hilm0. Yeah, so I went to the Congress this year. I think in the end we had a little bit over 300 participants, which was small for a Congress. Because, well, there was a 2-year break, of course, which I think caused some decrease in the number. But of course, there was also the fact that the organizing of this year's Congress was decided in April this year. Before April, the organizers hadn't decided if they will cancel or not, and they were told by the EGC that they do it. And so they basically organized everything within 3 months. And working with that kind of time schedule, it was finally difficult to get a little bit. It was difficult to get so many people over, but they still got over 300 in the end, and it was a very nice Congress overall. So now, 2023 was supposed to be in Ukraine originally, and well, you can guess how that's going. There's no way they could have a Congress right now. So that one has been moved to Germany. Normally 1 year for organizing a Congress is kind of short, but if they could do it in 3 months this year, I'm sure 7 or 8 months is going to be great, also in Germany. So if you cannot wait to go to a European Go Congress, I'm sure the Leipzig one is going to be great. And then, of course, there's a 2024 one, which is also already being prepared. And I'm quite sure that at this point of time, it's being better prepared than the German one, and it's going to keep on improving. Like, if you go to the website, there's all this graphic design already. The team is working hard on it. So from the looks of it, I think the 2024 Congress is definitely going to be something that you shouldn't miss if you feel like going to congresses. So just something to keep in mind. Okay, so much for the advertisement speech. We have 1 hour today. I'm giving myself 5 or 10 minutes of overtime flexibility, so we might go 5 or 10 minutes overtime, but roughly 1 hour from now on. So here's the topic then, optimal time usage in tournaments. Maybe I will, well, why talk about time usage in the first place? Let's see if my slides are working here. Ah, yeah, okay, here we have in the chat also the 2024 link for Toulouse. So have you ever heard of this kind of a comment? Have you ever heard your opponent say something like, this became such a difficult situation. I'm sure I would have been able to read this out if I had more time. Like maybe it was a life and death situation. They missed some move. They played a wrong move. They died. The game was over. And then they say that if only I had more time, I could have done it. Have you heard anything like that? Have you yourself said anything like that? Maybe. I think it could happen all the time. Yep. Anybody else? I might be the opponent saying that sometimes. Yeah. So, well, of course, when we talk about kind of, well, on KGS there are free games, but like practice games or games that you play for fun, you most of the time don't have a clock, right? And of course, you're supposed to be playing at some pace so that you don't use too much time, so that you don't make your opponent get bored out of their skull. But if you're talking about tournaments, you always have this set time, right? Okay, let me just put the slide here for a little bit. Yeah, so in a tournament, we have a time setting, and at that point, it's part of the game, even if we don't really want to think of it in that way. Like, I think Go players ideally want to think of the game as something that you just need to look at the board, and the board is everything, and that's all you need to care about. But that's very not true in tournaments. In tournaments, time is part of the game, as long as there is a time setting, of course. It's a resource that you have, and that you should try to make the best use of. So it means that learning to manage your time gives you better results. Quite, it's not even a small difference. Like, a big number of games are often lost on stupid oversights or misreads, and it would have made all the difference if you had, say, 5 minutes more at that time, or if you didn't get to the Byoyomi too early, which caused a mistake, and so on and so on. So learning to make the best use of our time is definitely something that I think we should focus on. So for today's lecture, then, we have basically two aspects of this. We're going to look at how to use your own time and how to make the most out of it, but also a little bit on how to use your opponent's time. It's not always the case that you get to use it, but there can be situations when the opponent is low on time, in which case maybe you can do something with it. And there are also ways that you can try to reduce the opponent's time. So that's what we're going to be looking at. First of all, maybe to get you all into this topic here, I thought of this comparison that basically time management in Go is like driving a car. So if you have a driving license, or if you have tried driving a car anyway, or if you've seen some movies or anything, you know that when you're driving on a road, you're supposed to keep some kind of distance to the car in front of you, right? Of course, there's different types of drivers and everything, but if you're going at 100 kilometers per hour and you're glued to the car in front of you, then the moment that the car in front of you decides to brake, it means that you're going to crash into them, right? So that's basically not giving yourself enough time to react, which is something that makes sense also in Go, I think. So as long as you want to drive safe, you're supposed to be keeping some, I don't remember if it's 3 or 4 seconds distance to the car in front, because you have this reaction time. It's going to take you like 1 second to figure out that the car in front is actually braking, and braking quickly, so that you can do your own braking. And so if you don't have enough time, then you're most likely going to crash. In Go terms, it means that if you use your time too early in the game, you go into middle game fighting, and then the difficult fight starts. Then there's the kind of situation that you make one wrong move and your group dies, the game is over, and you're in Byoyomi, and that's basically giving yourself minimum flexibility for your time usage. Make sense? So let's do it this way. Try to imagine the worst possible situation to be in under time pressure. I'm just makes complete sense. That's good. I just wanted to put this idea this way because okay, let's go back to the chat view. I actually came up with something from my own game, which was pretty much the worst possible situation. So okay, this is from a late middle game. Well, we can still call it middle game actually. Situation. I was white in this game. The opponent was a 7-dan professional. I had just played N9. And so there was this kind of situation where I had a group at A, which is not completely alive because of possibility of black starting an attack at B4. There's a group at B, and there's the group at C. So technically speaking, territory-wise in this game, I was still ahead. The early game was fine for me, but I messed up here in the center. Yes, this is the cockroach game. This is the game after which I coined the term cockroach style. Yeah. So I messed up a little bit in center. I lost Sente over there. Black became way too strong. And then it got to this situation where white has 3 groups that seem extremely weak, and black has Sente to... Black has Sente, so white has to try to manage them separately. Imagine if you're also in Byoyomi in this setting, while the opponent has, say, 30 minutes of main time. That's going to be a really tough job, right? To try to turn this game into a win, or try to keep it as a win, right? So this is basically exactly the kind of scenario where you're on the highway, and you're right behind the car in front, and then they're just thinking about when they should brake and cause the crash, pretty much. So what is it that we should do if we want to be on the safe side for our time usage? What do you think? So let's put it this way to make it more concrete. Where should you use your time in a game? At which points of the game should you spend your time? Of course, you're going to be using some throughout the game, right? But where should be the main focus? Opening game, middle game, end game, fighting situations, early corner Joseki. Can I get some ideas in the chat? At my level at least, do not spend too much on Fuseki. You won't lose too much there even if you make mistakes. When the difference between 2 moves is a big difference. Okay, so that's kind of yeah, that's a possible way of thinking. That's kind of like a polarized or a critical situation in a game. So like if you get to play in a particular part of the board, or if the opponent gets to play there first, if that makes a huge difference, then it's saying that there's a kind of conflict brewing, maybe. Critical middle game situations and just before Byoyomi. Fighting. Fights. Okay, so I'm seeing many comments on fights here. So let's just put it this way then. Imagine this opening situation here, and You should spend your thinking time during your opponent's time and use yours for power moves like nothing and playing frisbee. I guess relaxing is also important, yes. And you should definitely be thinking during your opponent's time as well. That's true. That's a good point. But yeah, okay. So consider this corner situation here. Black just invaded. And let's think in terms of the classic double hane joseki. So white could play like this and like this. So that's a joseki sequence, right? Or white could play from this side and do the same thing, right? So which one of these two directions do you think is better for white? Any votes? Let's call this direction the direction A. Okay, let's put it here. And let's call this direction the direction B. So now you can just vote between A and B. 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 That's B. A is the black pawn on the upper side. B is the black pawn on the left side. Doesn't matter. You say the difference between one side and the other is just 1 point. Yeah, Marcel has seen, well, most likely a few of my lectures. Well, possibly all of them. Anyway, for the Nordic Go Dojo, where we also had similar situations. I'm just bringing this up because the fun thing here is that in the old days before AI, I'm pretty sure that almost all pros would have agreed that this result is ideal for black. Like, this is the best ever. Black shouldn't get this kind of ponnuki on the upper side to work with his Sanrensei that also has the perfect enclosure at B to make a huge framework. And most likely in the old days, basically all pros would say that this is the correct way, this is the only way. Like, not only is the framework on the right side nullified, but also the black ponnuki at A, okay, let's just mark it with triangles. The black ponnuki is facing an uninteresting direction on the left side because it's nullified by the white C stone. I'll mark it as C here, C stone here. So that was the old understanding I'm saying. So I just double checked this with the AI. I mean, I had my own idea already, but I double checked it. They're completely the same. There's not even a 1 point difference here. This one and this one, they both give the game as completely even, like 0.0 points lead for either player. That close. Well, at least the AI I checked, right? That's just because the game is too early. There's no conflicts going on. Okay, black has a nice structure, but it's not turning into territory yet or anything. So, like, the actual crucial decisions are still after this point. This is just preparation for the game. So, in an absolute sense, this game is even. In an absolute sense, you haven't made a mistake. Hi, Oscar. Welcome in. But of course, in terms of playing style, if you think that you as white don't like this position here, where black has the framework going on, then for you personally, you probably don't want to play like this. For you, you may want to pick this direction instead. So that's to be able to play a game that you yourself are comfortable with. So it's not about good or bad in an objective sense. That's the main point here. So that's the one thing. First of all, in the opening, there are these kinds of direction questions that actually don't make any difference. Like, you can feel good or bad about them, but in a good number of cases, actually, it doesn't make a difference. And even if it seems to make a difference, in most cases, actually, the AI says the difference is like 1 point at the most, in my experience, which is what Marcel also said here. So if a seemingly big mistake costs you 1 point in the opening, is this normal advertisement? It doesn't seem like normal advertisement. Should I ban this? I cannot read it, but okay, it seems suspicious. I think I'll just ban this. How do I do it again? Moderator. Okay, never mind then. Okay, never mind. Sorry. So what was I saying here? Yeah, so even seemingly big differences actually in the opening make like 1 point difference at most. And 1 point is a relatively small thing. If you're able to play through the game by only playing 1 point mistakes throughout, you're going to be a relatively strong down player already. Well, it depends a little bit on the game, but in general, it's like that. And also, if you play the wrong direction here, if you choose the wrong move between A and B, that might be a -1 point, but as long as you play the joseki correctly after that, the rest of your moves are going to be perfect. So actually the loss per move is going to be very small even in that case. So what I'm just trying to say here is that actually, in most cases, opening choices don't matter for the end result. You're not making big losses here. So in the opening part of the game, actually what you want to do is to try to play a kind of game that you feel comfortable playing, and then you just want to quickly go through it. So you can play your Sanrensei if you like it, or if you dislike the opponent's Sanrensei, you can even do something uncommon. Like, strictly speaking, you can even invade it immediately just to prevent the opponent's moyo. So like, sorry. This could happen like this, like this. Okay, this is not ideal. In this case, I think white has lost 1 point already. But that's a 1 point that you're paying in order to be able to play the game that you feel more comfortable playing. So I would still take that as a deal in general. Sometimes I'm making big time losses. Is it the stream problem or... sorry. Okay, big time. I was slow. Yeah, but basically you can also do this kind of thing. So in the opening, you just want to play something you're comfortable with, right? Then there's the question of the end game, where it was like this. So consider, on the other hand, this board position here. This is from a game that we will have a look at a little bit more in detail soon. But let's say you're playing white here, black has just played p3, and let's say you have magical information that you're losing this game by 7.5 points. So what are you going to do here? Give it a look. Very precise magic. Yeah. Basically seeing the future, right? Well, I think when I was playing this game, it was more like I was counting 6 points. Okay, it wasn't even a pun. Okay. Yeah, most of the disadvantage you get during a Fuseki is that you lose time on your clock. That is very much the point, yes. Time to go ham. So, for example, in this kind of a situation here, this whole board position, so let's say we know that we are losing by about 6 or 7 points. So if we want to try to win from this kind of a situation, it's generally not enough to just keep playing well yourself, right? I mean, of course, the only thing you can do is play the best moves you can. But if you're losing by too much, that won't be enough to turn the game around. So what you need to do is to try to get the opponent to make a mistake. You need to create complications on the board, and ideally, well, for example, you might make use of the opponent's lack of time to cause them to make a misread, and then use that to turn the game around. If we go with today's topic, right? But in order to get that mistake to happen, you need to create the complications. Where are you going to create the complications in this game? Yeah, so here we have the S12, jump at A, and try to fight the Ko. And a way to play also says that prepare to resign. Yes, so this could create a fight. It's not very dangerous on black, since black's not losing anything but the right side territory. Also, if if white loses the ko, then the corner is dying, right? So starting this ko has an enormous risk on white, like an extra payment that white has to make for starting it. So that's not really feasible in this case, which is why a way to play here is saying prepare to resign. So basically the problem here is that when we get into the end game, it gets much harder to make big mistakes. In the end game, by definition, all the groups on the board are going to be alive, so there's not going to be difficult life and death battles anymore. It's only going to be about territory on the board, and also a relatively small amount of that. So even if you make a mistake, it's going to be a relatively small mistake in the end. Just jump in at S4 and then resign. Yes, so basically the whole audience here is agreeing that there's not really much that white can do anymore. Black's position is too solid, black doesn't have weaknesses, it's difficult for white to create trouble on this board. Which basically leads us to make the claim that we also shouldn't save too much of our time for the end game, because there's not so much we can do with it anymore, right? The opponent's positions are going to be solid. Okay, maybe you can optimize 1 or 2 points if you're lucky, but it's very hard to get more than that. Well, unless there's a huge difference in level. If the opponent is 10 Q and you're 5 done, you can get more, but I think you wouldn't be losing this game in that case. So basically, the way I usually say it is that it's enough to play the end game in Byoyomi. Byoyomi in general is going to be good enough. You're not going to be making big losses. You're generally not going to be losing the game there, unless the game is really close, but that's like the rare case, so to say. Where's the slide? One moment. Yeah, so here's just the slide. So basically, few games are lost in the opening, or as we saw, it's hard to lose points in the opening in the first place. And on the other hand, endgame is the simplest part. It's not so easy to make big mistakes in the endgame. And this brings us to the conclusion that you should use most of your time in middle game fighting. And in fact, in my experience, actually, it seems like the majority of games are decided in late middle game fighting. One small caveat, some games that look like an end game end up escalating back into a fight. That is true, and that's also a kind of a definition question. My definition of the end game is the part of the game that starts, or it starts after the point when there are no unsettled groups on the board anymore. So Oscar is saying that some endgames have a lot of dynamic potential in that groups that seem to be fine suddenly are not so fine anymore, right? Those ones I would strictly speaking still define as middle game. Like they might be peaceful for a while, but they still have groups that are not quite 100% settled and strong. But well, that's just my definition, right? But once the game gets to a point where all the groups are settled, no questions asked, that's where you don't need a lot of thinking time anymore. All right. Then I think there's a kind of often repeated point of view that you should try to have more time than the opponent. Now, what do you think about that? My old Japanese style make the word fighting no sense to me. Fighting can be conflicts as well. It can just be the players disagreeing about something, right? But yeah, so there's this old kind of a adage, kind of, or well, rule, heuristic, that you should try to have more time than the opponent, which can be good in some cases. Silly rule, both players can't have more time. That's also true, yes. And like if you're fighting to have more time than the opponent, then the game is actually going to be played pretty quickly, right? In which case the player who is more used to playing with short time settings is going to have the advantage, right? Staying ahead on time is one of my axioms. Yeah, I generally used to play like that as well. Eventually both players start playing instantly. Faster than the speed of light. Mm-mm-mm. But yeah, so it can be good to some degree, especially if we are still in early game and we are aiming to have a big decisive fight in the middle game. But consider if the game just continues peacefully until the end game starts, and let's say you have 40 minutes of time remaining, and the opponent has used all of their time. The opponent goes to the end game in Byoyomi, and you have 40 minutes left. So how efficient is that? Usually speaking, the fact, I mean, I covered that time is a resource, right? Your time allotment. So if you go into Byoyomi, if you go into endgame with 40 minutes left on the clock, that's 40 minutes that you could have used in a decisive reading fight, for example, in the middle game, right? The rule of stay within 5 minutes doesn't escalate to insanity, though. That's also true, yes. It can be healthy to stay close to your opponent, but at the same time, I would generally advise to try to make the best use of your time, as in try to have enough of it at all points of the game, but aim to use it by the time the end game starts, right? The one with 40 minutes is probably a child. Most often the case, yes. And also, yes, highly depends on the opponent. So if you know the opponent is somebody who always plays quick, then most likely you can just, well, you can forget about trying to stay ahead, for example. I tend to play quickly against slow opponents to abuse them. So on the other hand, that's the point of view that you think the opponent is trying to think on your time as well, and then you just don't give them that resource, right? Mm. Okay, so that was it. Then I also made a kind of a short slide here about the three modes of playing, basically. So, okay, I'm going to do them in different order here. So here we have the territory or end game optimization, basically, which is mostly in the end game. So if we're strictly talking about territory only, and especially if we're talking about small amounts of territory, that's not really something that you need to spend time for, right? So that can be usually done in Byoyomi. Then there's the point number one, shape or move efficiency, which is kind of like, in my opinion, like playing in Joseki or playing the simple normal moves, right? And then there's a third mode, which is kind of a detailed life and death reading. I got these three modes thanks to Marcel's comment in a previous NGD chat. Like there's three different modes of thinking that you can switch in your head. I think most people don't think in these terms, but in my opinion, it can help a lot to kind of keep track what you're trying to do right now. Because it seems like a lot of Western players actually try to do the detailed reading when it doesn't make sense. So, for example, let's finally have a look at this game here, shall we? What shall we do? Okay, so I will just show them the start, actually. So I was black in this game. The opponent is yet another 7 done. So I played this extension here, which is called slightly bad for black, but I had researched it. It's just like half point again. And like this. So consider if this was your tournament game now. You're white in this game. What would you be thinking about here? Or what would be going through your mind, basically? What would... what would you try to do maybe, or try to focus on here? Is that Chochikun? Ah, that's Chochikun. Maybe I will put the chat back here as well. Chochikun it is, yes. I played Chochikun actually just 3 months ago. I still have moves like F3 to pass the time. O18, R15, neither. Should we fight at top right now or come back later, if at all? Oh, nice, we have a raid here. Welcome, welcome. Yeah, so Hilm0's comment is basically what I'm also trying to, what I'm aiming at with this lecture, right? So what you want to do here is think if you need to be focusing on the upper right corner and how much do you need to be focusing on it. So this is what we would call the first mode thinking, shape efficiency, or it could even be just move efficiency. Is it okay for you to play elsewhere, or do you have something at hand that you need to think about? So for example, do you think there's some black move that you cannot allow here? Is it, for example, too bad for white if black gets to play this connection here? Well, it turns out that your corner is still alive, you can still play elsewhere, so maybe it's not severe, right? Or, okay, black can capture one stone here, but if you didn't feel like fighting anyway, then this stone should also be something that you can give up, right? Going after that line of thinking. Or on the other hand, if you are the kind of player who likes, for example, fighting more, maybe in that case, in your personal opinion, this is a situation that you cannot overlook, that you have to keep fighting. But this means that your N15 here is going to start an early conflict in that case. And then you need to expect to have to use some time here to make sure that you don't make bigger mistakes, right? That's the kind of thing that you should be prepared for when you keep playing here. R15 cut seems juicy. I think the main worry is something like black P18 and then black fighting your cut. So if we play, that could be interesting. So black trying to do like this, and if white cuts, then crawl on the second line forever. And if it goes here, then we try to kill the corner, huh? Killing the corner, Hane. But throw-in threatens to live with S19. Well, without going too deeply into what is correct or not in this Joseki, you see that right now here, what we are doing already is the second mode. This is basically the detailed Tsumego reading, and this is going to use a lot of your time. Yeah, so Oscar is saying that he's not worried about this, but if there was a worry, it would be about something like this, right? But so the point is, can you save your time by looking at this position here flexibly, or should you prepare to basically pay some of your time here to read this correctly? And how you should go about it actually now depends on the tournament or the time setting. So it's a little bit silly maybe, but if this is an online blitz game, or if this is a regular weekend tournament game with 40 minutes basic time, or if this is a Congress main tournament game with 2 hours of basic time, probably should affect how you view this situation here, right? Because if this is an online blitz, then this is going to be more or less uncontrollable fighting. For example, if it's 20 seconds per move, then you're going to start an early game fight with 20 seconds a move, and it's going to be very swingy. If you have 40 minutes basic time, it might be that you end up using half of it just in this first corner. And that's something that you need to assess for yourself if you're comfortable with it or not, right? Do you want to pay your half of your time, half of your resources right here in the first corner? Or do you keep waiting for now? Or if it's a congress, then we have 2 hours. Now that's a different matter. Like, if you end up using 20 minutes here, well, that's still 1 hour and 40 minutes that you can use for something else. So in the congress time setting, you could very well fight here. And even if you make a mistake, it's most likely still not going to be decisive, right? So the point I want to make here is simply that the time setting actually makes a difference on what you're thinking about here. Why wouldn't you just play R15 directly? Yeah, it's a possible move. And then black plays this kind of strange preparation. So black aims to play ABC here next. White captures. And as far as my research goes, black plays elsewhere. Yeah. So this comes a little bit early now, but this is one of the other points I wanted to make in this lecture. So the point is that, especially in tournaments with limited time at hand, it's actually kind of effective to research something like this beforehand, right? So nowadays you know that most people are going to play the 3-3 invasion, right? So if you have an AI at hand, you can do things like research variations for an uncommon move, like O16, for example. Ideally, you want something that doesn't cost you too much. Like, that's not a big mistake, even if the opponent plays optimally. And in most cases, even if the opponent does play optimally, like also happened in this game, so it was a fighting variation, the opponent played like this. But what I actually gained this way was, I think I got my opponent to use 10 or 15 minutes just for these moves. And this was a so-called blitz tournament in Japan. There was only 1 hour of main time here. So that 10-15 minutes out of 1 hour actually, you actually feel it in that case. And I had it researched, so I basically didn't have to use almost any time at all. I still have like 57 minutes left at this point. So that's a 10-minute edge I already had on the opponent, which, as we have covered, can very easily make a difference, right? Okay, everybody still following? So then let's just go forward with this game. So yeah, time is valuable. Okay, that's good. If you take that as the only takeaway from the lecture, that's already very good. Antti uses privilege when it goes 1 hour blitz. And Oscar always laughs at it. I'm mostly just doing it for Oscar's reaction, actually. Yeah, so M18 here actually is kind of an urgent move. Like, it's not critical, but if white doesn't do something here immediately, it's going to give black this Hane connection in Sente, which is going to be a rather big one. So black's group becomes strong, black gets territory, white's corner is reduced. So this is something we would almost call urgent. It's a territorial urgent, but still kind of urgent. Coming back to endgame, it's kind of similar. It's the easy part and you don't need time only if you know already major principles. Yeah, exactly. The difficult parts are always in the middle game where the board is open and you have these unsettled groups and you need to manage them all at the same time while also trying to be efficient about territory, right? So there's many different things to keep in mind at the same time. That's the problem. Yeah, so this happened. Okay, I could have played L18, but it might be Gote. So here was basically one of the... This might be the best kind of time ploy I played in this game, actually. So like we have this situation here, right? But by end game you're worn out from mid game reading. That is actually a point in favor of not thinking too much. Or it's a point in favor of saving your time as much as possible. Like, if you try to fight in every single situation, you're going to use your time quickly, and you're also going to use your kind of... I think the technical term is actually mental fatigue. So you're going to accrue mental fatigue more quickly. So the more you have to think, the more you have to make decisions during game actually affects your ability to do it in the future. Like, I'm sure everybody has had these situations where you have done too much studying or too much mental work, so that when people start asking you for decisions like what should we eat today, should we eat that or that, you feel like you don't want to decide anymore, just do something, right? That's basically a point when you're out of your mental fatigue is at a maximum. So that's also something we want to avoid, besides just running out of time, right? So actually conserving your time, conserving your energy as well, they're both important in terms of tournament games. But yeah, so in this situation here, I think I got the idea on my opponent's turn, actually. I don't think I paid much here. So white played here in the upper right corner. White got some extra territory, and if black, for example, wedges here, white's actually going to just go inside there. If black blocks, well, white might actually just connect even like this. But that's something I think black can also get later, if he wants to. So, usually speaking in this situation, I think black would be playing something like an extension around here to try to create a base on the upper side. And I remember having thought that I would then dislike if white were to get to press around here, basically to get to flatten black with something like this, considering that the upper side is still open from A, right? So this just didn't look like anything that was so interesting to me. So on my opponent's turn here, I was thinking that, is there some way that I can avoid the scenario of black A, white presses at B? I started looking into this schema, and I actually found a way for it to work. So, of course, here the main question is if white can push through and cut with ABC, which is what happened in the game. But as long as black can manage it, well, then the game continues. So, this J14 here is a kind of... We should actually try to think of a nice term for this kind of move. So, initially I thought I would call this a kind of pushing move. It's like... It's trying to get a better result locally than is normal. Normally speaking, black would play something like this, or if black wants to have a higher shape, maybe something like G14. These are normal moves, right? And when black plays the Keima in the game, black wants white to answer with something like a diagonal here, so that black can have a kind of more thick position on the upper side, thanks to... So black got A, white cannot press B anymore. So black would call this an improvement, right? So J14 here is kind of like pushing white, because black's trying to get more than black's supposed to. So this is pushing white to make a decision, or basically to fight back, right? How should we call this kind of a move? It's very common in professional Go, so I want to think of a nice term for this. My first instinct to black J14 as white would probably be H17 and second push and cut. Goading. Yeah, goading would be a verb, but the point is I would like to have a noun for this if possible. Well, goading could be a noun as well if we transform it, but... no, J14 came, was not prepared anymore. I remember I basically prepared up to here. Like, this was among the many variations that I had checked. Preemptive. I mean, it could be preemptive as well, but the main message here is that black's inviting white to attack, or inviting white to start a fight. And the point is that when we invite the opponent to start a fight, the opponent has to read, right? Because if the opponent goes into the fight without reading, well, there's always a chance that you make a big mistake there. Like, you go for a fight that wasn't possible after all, and then you just get destroyed immediately. Overplay? It could be an overplay, but it's more like it's on the line here, right? Taunting. Taunting, yeah, taunting is true as well. Possibly not exactly what I'm looking. I mean, it's similar to the other ideas here, but maybe there is nothing better. Seemingly abusive, but not. But yeah, so basically, if you want to be kind of smart about it, these kinds of moves are how you get the opponent to read more and to use their time, right? But of course, at the same time, you need to have done your reading that you can actually handle the cut, which I had done in this case. So my reading was that, so if white plays here, well, if black connects, this would be black getting captured, so the A-stones would be lost. But I had read that I would simply sacrifice the 2 stones to the right, and I can instead get these other cutting stones here. Provocative. So possibly something like this could have been the outcome. And I had judged this would be okay. Okay, so both players captured some cutting stones, but black's right side position is fine. Black didn't lose so much territory. And this upper side shape is extremely nice for black. So that was the judgment work I had done here. So white had no choice but to run with the stones. I took N18. This was still forced. And I got to capture here in center. So that was nice. I remember in the game I was a little bit happy about this. Then I checked the AI after the game, and the AI says black is 5 points better, which I quite didn't feel, I have to say. I felt just a little bit better, maybe 1 or 2 points. Then we jump, and then we jump. Okay, so let's see, we have about 10 minutes left. Okay, so let's see this one, and then let's see the other side of the board. So I just... I quickly showed the 3 play modes earlier, right? I mean, point 3 was the regular endgame moves, which I called should be relatively easy to figure out, even in Bioemi, right? Or if you're in Fisher, well, it means when your Fisher time is less than 1 minute, for example. Basically, when you're relying on the increment to stay in the game, right? And then there's the shape and move efficiency, which I would actually just call playing normal fine moves. Like, you're not doing anything special. And then there's detailed reading. And I'm covering this again because this fight in the center is a little bit... Well, black's trying to find balance between mode 1 and mode 2 here. So in the game, of course, I was playing black here. I, of course, simply thought about jumping. So that's the most normal move that there is, right? And in that case, we are going to see that, okay, white's also going to jump. And getting capped here seems kind of big still. So it seems like black has to jump again. For white, getting capped here is also big. So, okay, so white's going to jump as well. Black's going to jump. White's going to jump. Do we still jump once more? Does white still jump or not? Maybe he does. So this is basically mode 1 thinking here. We are playing the most natural, normal moves that cannot possibly be very bad, and we're just going forward with the game, right? I guess Oscar would approve here. Just not doing anything, right? So this is, of course, something I had in mind, right? But also, I was aware of the fact that the opponent had been using more time here, and we are playing a blitz tournament. So I pressed here, again, intentionally trying to cause a fight, right? Now the AI seems to think this is a big mistake, but it worked out. So we got in this kind of situation, I still attack white's eye shape here. Okay, so white plays some forcing moves and cuts back in turn. And then we have a new whole board difficult fight at hand, right? Well, it turns out that black's supposed to be in big trouble here because actually the white A group is not in trouble and actually the B group is going to be in trouble, but it's not so obvious to see for the human eye, right? Even if the AI does see it. And eventually this did turn out very nicely for black. Possibly thanks to white running out of time eventually, but well, also, as I said, for humans this situation is not quite so easy. But basically, why I want to show this here is that you have this choice here. You have the choice of just playing normal moves with A. That's going to conserve your time. You're just playing normal. You cannot fall behind. But then you're basically trying to postpone the important key fights of this game. Like, if both of the players just play simple and nothing ever happens, well, it's going to be an even game, but it's going to just go to the end and somebody wins by half a point maybe, right? If nothing happens. But usually, because you have this time as a resource, so you want to look for ways to make use of it. So to try to create a difficult fight at a time when your opponent, for example, cannot read it through. So in that case, we basically, well, we can consider the simple move at A, or if we want to push the game, try to move it towards the complications, then you can start thinking about slightly unorthodox moves, like this press here. Well, it's still a normal move, but it's going to invite white to basically fight back, right? And then we are back to the using time, or the second mode of thinking, detailed life and death rating, right? Now, as the last thing for today's lecture, I just wanted to show that, so it's also possible to play, so to say, play the opponent's time, right? Which is something that I have actually mentioned several times here already. So, first of all, here in the upper right corner, I already showed this situation where I had researched this Joseki, which, if correctly played, turns out to be fine, but this is going to cost the opponent some time, right? Now, what should we do if we get into a situation where the opponent is actually short on time? That's something we want to have a look at. That's going to be the last thing for this lecture. So, I think it was, sorry, it was here. So this is the same game still, later position. So we see something fun happened in the center fighting. Finally, the cutting stones at A, let's just mark it this way, got captured. And this got black into a kind of nice lead. So it was the 7.5 points in the end. So of course, well, it turned out in this game that black was actually the one with more time here. Black never had a time problem. But let's just consider the hypothetical here. So if we were playing as white instead, and if black was the one short on time, I mean, black's leading the game, but black's short on time. We're white. Game is still not in the end game. Game is still going. How should we try to make use of black's time shortage? Let's say black is in Byoyomi and we have 30 minutes. How do we try to make use of it? Can I get some opinions or ideas? Of course, at first you need to take some time just to have a look at what's going on here. Yeah, complicate, yep. Make complications that require him to read a lot. To get a bit more than you deserve. That's exactly the right mode of thinking. So of course, what was I trying to say? It's not possible to turn out I mean, okay, so we say black's leading by 6 or 7 points, and the game is quickly getting towards the end, right? There's still some moves remaining, like 150 moves, but it's gradually getting towards the end game, right? If it goes to the end game like this, basically nowhere for white to turn around. So the point is that you cannot, in this kind of a situation, you cannot turn the game around just by playing well, because the opponent is also playing well, and then the earlier points difference is just going to be upheld, basically. So we don't want to continue this game in a simple way. We want to complicate. We need to get the opponent to make a mistake, right? Your own good play cannot win this game. You need the opponent to make a mistake. That's something we need to realize here. And then it's a question of how we try to cause the mistake, right? We want to create the situation that in the end, the opponent complains that, if I only had a little bit more time, I could have read it out. That's the whole point, right? We want to find something that they don't have the time to read correctly, and then cause the mistake. Actually, complaining like that is kind of missing the point of tournament games, right? You're not going to have unlimited time to read everything you need to read. So what do we have? Q4, E12, C9. Nice ideas. E12, I think, is out of the question, because the white upper center stones at A are captured. So E12 is actually not threatening anything. Black's not going to respond here. Black's fine with getting cut, right? Because cutting here is not costing black anything. Yeah, that's basically a dummy region. But for example, I showed the endgame position already. The whole right side just became black territory, right? So one way for white to challenge black here is basically to, for example, go in the lower right corner. Black's most likely thinking that the lower right corner, as it is already his territory, or almost territory. But, okay, very good. So ask R3. That's my first impression here as well. So, like, the lower right corner seems like the area where black should be getting his biggest territory. So it seems the most annoying thing to attach at R3 and basically just ask black, like, what's going on here? Is this really all yours? And see what's going on, right? So black might be playing a Hane here. We respond with a Hane here. And there's already several things black has to start thinking about. Like, is it fine to give white the possibility to live in the corner? Should we try to capture it? Can we actually capture it if white moves out like this? Is it good enough if just this happens? And that's all that black has to do in his Byoyomi. Which might be, well, in this game it was 60 seconds per move, but let's say it was 30 seconds per move. And then it's not so difficult anymore to see some mistakes coming up, right? Of course, to some degree, black might have time Suji moves at hand. I think somebody mentioned time Suji there in the chat earlier. So, for example, black might play this kind of a move. Actually, this is not time Suji, is it? Okay, we might peep here. This threatens to capture the corner. So this is a possible move for black to play to get like 30 seconds more of thinking time. But then there's always the risk that white ignores and sacrifices the upper right corner. Or it's possible that black actually just lost like 1 or 2 points with it. So the more black has to resort to these kinds of moves, the more the game might actually be getting closer gradually. So usually the time Suji moves are also something that we, on the losing side, want for the opponent to play. So that's the kind of idea. In the game, white played a J2, which is also a big one, definitely a big move. But so in the game as black, I was very happy to get this P10 at this timing. So I just closed the right side territory like this. And from now on, the R3 invasion is just, I basically killed it. So now if white tries to invade, I'm going to go down here. And I'm just saying that it's trivial for black to capture this, well, any kind of white invasion on the right side. There's nothing that white can do there. So this was most likely a key moment for black to simplify this game with a P10 here. And it would have been much more annoying if at this timing white went in. So if black tried to enclose it now, well, white would be living in the corner, and actually the right side is not so big anymore. So kind of what the R3 move here is doing, it's kind of challenging black's current board plan or what black wants to do. Black actually does want to just enclose the right side and get the lower right corner and just get the territory, because by black's counting it's enough, right? That's what we want to challenge. That's how we get the opponent to think. We need to actually kind of challenge their worldview, right? The second thing, white did have one attempt at complications a bit later. White played this attachment here, which is basically following the same thing, so same thinking. The normal move would be something like this, but black's just going to play this diagonal to solidify the left side, erase the complications there, and go for endgame. It's good enough. So what white wants is to attach here. Basically, white's hoping for black to defend like this. So white goes out. There's a cutting point at c10, so black has to defend. And white can turn and get a lot more on the left side. So as Marcel was saying, to get more than he deserved, basically. This is the kind of challenging moves that also you want to think about here, especially if the opponent is low on time. So you play here, it's the opponent's turn, opponent knows that they have a little time remaining, and then they have the difficult question of, okay, so can they pay a little bit? Is it fine for them to get a suboptimal result here with b10? Or, after all, is it too big of a loss, and should they play the, strictly speaking, correct move of b12? Shape-wise, it's optimal, but this is going to be leading to some kind of a difficult fight like this, for example. White might set up this kind of huge co-fight here, for example. It didn't happen in the game, but I think this is what white should have done. Yeah, so it doesn't have to be a big fight, but we have to play moves where the opponent doesn't have a clear answer. Yes, like, actually what we want to do is create for the opponent this kind of feeling that they don't know which one is better. Like, is it good enough to keep the game simple and fall back, or is this something they cannot accept and they have to resist? That's the best kind of line for complications, I think. And then again, okay, if the opponent plays it the simple way, we go out, the opponent defends. Well, even just locally, this c12 is already good for white. But if this is not good enough to turn the game around, well, then we just go forward. Because black doesn't have an obvious great move of causing trouble for white here on the left side. So, for example, we might go deeper in here. And now we give black the next headache of what exactly to do about this shape here, right? Is the best thing black can do press here? Well, that's not getting black much more, right? Is it like this? But I think we can cut and it's still complicated for black. Is it like this? Well, then it's again not so much. Is it here? But then we're going to fight. Like this or like this. And so on, right? So we want this situation where the opponent has to think what exactly is the correct thing. And there's no single obvious correct answer, right? Is this what the Japanese call bullying, ijime? I think ijime, bullying is usually with regard to the opponent's group. But it has to be a weak group, so it's not like this. Ijime. In my opinion, something more like this is ijime, where black is threatening this white group that's objectively speaking going to be fine. But I think the big group would have to be alive for this to be a proper ijime. Like, it would have to be one-sided, of course, right? Considering what bullying means. Okay, but it was a short lecture and we're already a little bit past the time already. So just I'm just bringing back here the main slide here, which is time is a part of the game. Time is a valuable resource, and learning to manage your time, well, also the opponent's time actually, does give you better results. Just something to keep in mind here. So actually, also as we saw in this position here, so actually, what kind of a time setting you have in the tournament actually should affect your play, should affect your thinking here. You should be thinking how much time you can afford in a particular kind of fight. Do you want an early fight here? or do you want to keep playing simple moves and aim for the big decisive fight later, right? And the less time you have, usually the fewer decisive fights you want, because they can always just, well, if you're losing, they're good, right? Losing side likes complications, but if the game is even, or if you think you're good, then you're going to want to reduce the number of these decisive fights to keep the game under control, right? Okay, that's the main content I had prepared for today. Do you have any questions remaining? We can have just a few minutes for last questions here. While you're thinking about the questions, so I'll just repeat that this was a lecture sponsored by the 2024 European Go Congress. You have the link there in the upper right corner. If you think you have the time and funds for it, you should definitely think about participating there. It is also a great idea to go there on a vacation with your family if possible, even if they don't play Go, because that's what many people are doing. There's many families with small children playing around. Well, some of them play the tournaments, but some of them are just hanging around. The people there are really friendly in general. On a related note, Jeff also did a lecture on managing time. True. Jeff also did a lecture on this at our NGD channel. Just a moment, I can get the link here as the last thing. Thanks for watching. I hope you had a good time, and I hope the content was useful. April 2021. April 2021. Where is that? Managing time pressure. Here it is. Yeah, here's the follow-up Jeff lecture if you're interested at our Nordic Go Dojo. I think Jeff did a kind of trick here where he forces you to think in byo-yomi. Like he puts up a position and then he gives you 30 seconds to think about your next move. It's very useful. Already registered whole family for Toulouse. That's great, Vesa. I'm also trying to go with the whole family if possible. Links cannot appear apparently. I see. Okay, so Marshall tried to put a link as well, but because of channel settings, it's not possible, it seems. Okay, well, if you just go to if you go to YouTube, you can go to the Nordic Go Dojo channel over there, and it's in April 2021, lecture by Jeff. Okay, like that. Okay, so thanks to everybody for watching. Thanks for the Congress for having me do this lecture, and the French Go Federation, of course, as well, right? There's the lecture link. Thank you, Hilm0. And I see there's no questions coming up. Yeah, so we'll finish here then. I hope to see you all at the Congress next year, or, well, at least at 2024, right? Thanks, bye.